everything under the sun related to diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. I am Mo Berkner-Boyd. I am a white woman with mid-length reddish curly hair. I'm rocking some red frames today. Have a green stone necklace, black t-shirt. Behind me is a bookshelf with all sorts of photos and books and fun stuff. I am joined today by Lindsay Scola. And Lindsay, you and I were introduced pretty recently. And from our first conversation, I loved it because Lindsay was like, let's hop on a Zoom, like, let's get to know each other, which I always love. And very quickly, when I learned the work that you're doing and what you're up to, I said, we have to have an everyday inclusion conversation. So Lindsay, welcome. Tell us what you're up to in the world, and then let's dig in.
Awesome. So lovely to be here. I have a company that I work with nonprofits and campaigns. It's called Audiamus, which means let us dare in Latin. I work with nonprofits and campaigns on their engagement with Hollywood, whether that's connecting with celebrities for amplification of their message, or working with writers' rooms about story inclusion. But really, how do we take what they're doing out in the world and moving that through culture? Because that is one of the most important things for me, is this understanding that in things like film and television specifically, we have this ability to move hearts and minds in ways that we can't in other places. Also, I'm a patient advocate with Project Sleep through the Rising Voices of Narcolepsy program, which is really important to me as a person with narcolepsy. And just 4 years after my diagnosis, getting really excited about talking to folks about what that means, and really having a great conversation around sleep.
So many places to go in this conversation. When you and I first chatted, you shared a couple experiences with me that really highlight the power and importance of representation in media and how that can impact inclusion in the everyday world, right? What's coming through our screens, and what that means for people watching, and particularly young people watching. So tell me a little bit about how you came to have a very direct line and understanding of representation and inclusion.
Well, I'm glad it seems direct to you. It did not. So, I mean, in terms of TV, like, I've just always loved TV. I grew up in a TV family. When we went camping, we'd sing TV theme songs around the campfire. I think the first song I knew all the lyrics to was Gilligan's Island, both the intro and the end credits song as well. And so TV was just sort of an important part of the picture for me. And then I don't think this truly hit me at the time, but when I was working for Barack Obama in Iowa in 2007, organizing for the 2008 caucuses, I was organizing at the University of Iowa, and I had a bunch of college students that were apoplectic that none of the candidates were pro-gay marriage, which is crazy when you think about what a short period of time that was and how different the conversation is now. But in 2007, people didn't really have that conversation without talking about their direct personal connection to it. For myself, I grew up at a synagogue with a gay cantor. And so for my family, that was always part of the conversation, that of course there wouldn't be any difference in rights there. And so I was really interested with these kids, where this was coming from for them. And they grew up watching Will and Grace. And I don't think in a pitch meeting for Will and Grace, they were talking about how they were going to change hearts and minds on gay marriage for an entire generation. But they absolutely did. And it really wasn't until I had this career in politics and was starting to say, I want to work in entertainment. And people would tell me that entertainment wasn't a job. And I finally came out to Los Angeles, and I was working for the Television Academy, and I was looking at all of the things that we did with the Emmys and had this giant aha moment, really piecing together this moment with those college students in Iowa and the conversation around gay marriage. And when you dig in and you look at it, there is a huge power in television, whether it's the Maude storyline on abortion, or it's the first interracial kiss on Star Trek.
Oh, I know. Rip.
I, I know, and it's particularly this week.
Yep.
Too soon there. Certainly she was a national treasure. But you have all of these moments, and then really interesting things come out. Like, there was a study at USC a few years ago where they looked at transgender viewpoints from people who watched an episode of Transparent and people who watched an episode of Royal Pains that happened to have a transgender character in that episode. The viewpoints on transgender issues from the audience watching Transparent don't change. There's something about, you signed up for that issue, you were okay with that issue and you signed up to watch that show. The people watching Royal Pains may have been introduced to their first trans character watching that show, and the viewpoints go up like this. So there's this real interesting opportunity that we have there, because it's a conversation with people. It's in their home. It doesn't.
It's proximity, right? It creates a proximity.
There was another USC study where people were asked to name their top 5 gay friends, and Will and Jack were listed over and over again. People had such an affinity to these characters on TV who really felt like they were friends and family of the people that were watching them. And, that's definitely not something we should take for granted, but also something, that we should really harness whenever we're able to.
Well, I think it's interesting because when almost everybody can remember seeing somebody that looked like them for the first time, right? When you talk about whether that's the disability community, people of color, like really across the board, because media has been dominated by majority group, white, non-disabled, straight, right, cisgender, all those things. When you see that again and again and again, and when slowly we're seeing representation and the direct line, I've always loved following Gina Davis's work, where, tracks how many women have speaking roles, have, agency in their characters, and I think the more data we have around this, the more powerful it becomes in terms of, you can't look away, right? You have to really be thinking like, and it's not TV per se, but right. But like Oscar's So White, just different things where I think the tracking is really important, to hold up a mirror to the industry to say, look, there's a problem here.
Yeah.
And look at these issues and how it's changed those issues. I mean, thinking to 2007, that seems a lifetime ago, and that seems like yesterday.
At right? The same time. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. And what a profound impact that had on policy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you see as steps forward? I talked a little bit about some of the organizations that are doing some of the research, some of the tracking. How do you see TV in particular? What do you see as what's going to be the tipping point to better representation?
I think that networks have to be willing to take a chance on things. It was really sad when Netflix let go of the rebooted One Day at a Time. I think that was when we saw this opportunity that we had, one of the first Latina families like on TV for a period of time, and then Netflix dropped it without any conversation around it. And then we're just seeing that again with the Gordita Chronicles on HBO Max, and letting things stay for a period of time without whatever magic ratings they think that they're supposed to have, so that they can find their audiences, and the people that are seeing themselves have an opportunity to keep doing that, so we can see it in more than one place. And I think that that's really going to be when we can start moving things forward in a way where it's not some mythical ratings number that you're trying to get across a hurdle, and the ability to show shows that maybe aren't going to appeal to everyone. Because we need more. We need more. And I think it's the people that can do that and do it in a way where it's still super entertaining television. I think sometimes when you see these shows where someone like set out to create social impact in the show, and it feels like it's beating you over the head, and
right.
social impact TV, and I'm like, I can't watch this. I don't know who else is watching this. Gloria Calderon-Kellett, who's the showrunner on One Day at a Time, talks about putting beans in the brownies. Other people talk about putting chocolate on the broccoli, but it still has to be super entertaining television, and then you can have all these other pieces in it.
Beans and the brownies. I love that. So let's talk about writers. And let's talk about who actually gets to be the creators of many of these shows, and who gets to even have the opportunity to pitch. I think I'm going to peel it back even farther than what shows remain, right, and find their audience, but what shows even get a chance. And I love, I'm just going to share with everybody, you're in your last class, right? So say more about this, because we need more people like you writing shows.
I've decided that I've been talking about this for too long, and it's time for me to try it as well. So yes, I have been taking TV writing classes, and I'm in my last week on my first TV writing class, and putting my final outline together today. But I think you're absolutely right. This starts long before what TV shows can make it to a second season. This is really about who's in those writing rooms, but also who gets the opportunity to share their work, to get in the writing room, who gets the opportunity to get representation, to get to the pitch meeting, and working so far back. We've seen a lot over the last couple of years with the diversity spot in the writer's room, to open that spot to one person, but then they don't have a way to continue being in that room the following year, which doesn't change the problem. And so there's a lot of people that are really trying hard to work on this, and to push from the outside, but there's got to be a lot more work from the inside to recognize that there's some of the system has to be blown up a little bit. So that we can get more people in those rooms and have those opportunities, because there are brilliant writers who have been working through festivals for years and years and years, just trying to get to the place where they can get representation, to get to the pitch, to get to the place where they can share their work with the network executives. And there has to be a way to gap that bridge sooner, so that there's more diverse work to hear from, because there's endless stories out there. So let's find some other people to tell them.
Well, and I think, right, it is like anything in this work. I feel like you have to look at the system side of things, right? And who is controlling the systems, and what needs to happen around equity in those systems, and interrupting unconscious bias in those systems. And all of that takes awareness. Right. So that piece, and then you can get to the inclusion. And you have to be working it from both sides. But if you're only working on, we're going to have one slot for the diverse writer, right? Versus like, they're diverse and everybody else isn't. And so I think the conversations like this are really important, and pressure is important. Because it's hard, behavior change is hard. And so what's some of that positive pressure that can be put on to say to those folks that are the gatekeepers about how this matters? So big, gnarly, worth every step that's taken, because again, the impact.
And just, strip away the impact for a second. In terms of entertaining television, there are other people that we can uncover some stories from, that we just haven't had the opportunity to see. And when you get some of these first time writers professionally in this space, you get new stories, you get more things to talk about. There's some things that we've seen a couple of times, and it's time to widen that, to expand the industry, especially in a time like now where there's opportunity for so much more content. But that really changes how you do some of the storytelling on the impact side, because when you think about times like the Maude storyline around abortion, a third of the people watching television that night were watching that show. You're never
so say more about that, because that was so groundbreaking, and I can't even remember what year that was.
I think it was 72. It was the year before Roe v. Wade. And you had a character in her 40s who didn't want to have another baby, and has a conversation with her husband, and they, decide this is the best thing for her. And it was absolutely groundbreaking, because you hadn't had that on TV that night. And it was, Norman Lear at his finest, making a decision to put something out regardless of what happened with sponsorships. And however, doing stuff like that now, you have so many less eyes on it. So it's not like you're ever going to have that one episode again that's going to change all of TV.
Right.
You can have shows that would potentially change the way we think about things, but even so, you're never going to have that place where a third of the people watching TV that night were watching that show. Will and Grace, a fourth of the people watching TV that night were watching that show. And as we have now more content, the numbers peel back so much. And so we're going to have to introduce stories in a really different way, across more places, if we're going to get people having more conversations around it outside of smaller audiences. And there's no one's cracked that code yet. So how do you keep having that conversation? But yeah, no, when you think about some of the things that were even potentially a small moment on a TV show, but really super groundbreaking, 30 something has the first time you see two men in bed together on,
right.
And they did lose sponsorships over that. But that was something that was important to that show.
Well, and the interracial kiss on Star Trek.
Yeah.
Right. That was in the late 70s. 60s. Okay. I'm like, I can't, right. Like all of those moments, there's a part of me, I have a deep love-hate relationship with social media. But I think about like TikTok, for example, you don't have gatekeepers there.
No.
And so people are creating so there's a part of that I really love. Some of the systems things that we were just talking about, they don't exist.
Yeah.
And so there's a proximity that can be created with that sort of, the medium is the same and different, and we still have to get there in the mainstream, right? The big players.
Yeah. And there's something interesting about that, because there is this opportunity for all this content. There's also kind of no checks and balances on it. So what's truthful and what's not, and there's that whole place in it. But
that's my love-hate, right? Because
exactly.
Because there can equally be really horrific content that's out there.
But as somebody with a rare disorder, social media is one of the places I found more information than any place else. Now, you definitely have to do research to make sure it's accurate. But, when you have something like narcolepsy that doesn't have a medication that's like insulin for diabetics, and there's plethora of things that you can take that ease some of your symptoms. It's been these conversations on social media that I found out things that I could bring up with my doctor when other medications weren't working for me. And so that's been something that's been super helpful. And especially when we've never had an accurate description of narcolepsy on television. And so when I actually got diagnosed with narcolepsy, I looked at my doctor and said, I've never fallen asleep in my soup. And he sort of did this. And I was like, it's like, Charlie Chaplin in a black and white movie, and he falls asleep while he's talking into a bowl of soup. That was what I thought narcolepsy was. I never fallen asleep while I was standing up and just keeled over. But because that's the type of stuff that I had seen on TV,
Right.
that's what I thought that narcolepsy was. There was an episode of Frasier where Niles didn't want to deal with his divorce, and so every time his wife came up, he would fall asleep, and that was what they called narcolepsy, and that's not narcolepsy either. And so it's these misrepresentations of a disorder that's really an issue with your sleep-wake cycle. So I can be overly sleepy during the day and I can't sleep at night. And some people with narcolepsy have cataplexy, which is a loss of muscle control when they're have a strong emotion. And so that causes them to sometimes fall over, but they're still awake. And so that's where maybe you get this sort of caricature moment of people falling over asleep. But I can't be the only disorder where we've had these misrepresentations and need more opportunity to share these stories.
Yeah, right. And that's the who's in the writer's chair.
Yeah.
Right. Like the people that were writing the Charlie Chaplin, that were writing were not people with narcolepsy.
No.
Right. So that gets back to it has to start with who actually gets the opportunity to put the story out there.
Yeah. And, this is definitely something I'd love to see more of as a conversation around sleep, because, 1 in 2,000 people have narcolepsy, but 1 in 5 people have a sleep disorder. And, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry where people will buy new pillows and melatonin and face masks and everything else and noise machines to try to make themselves sleep better. But we don't have conversations with our doctors, and we don't have examples for us to see that if we're having a really hard time with sleep or we're beyond tired during the day, there might be something else at play.
Well, and how, like, again, just back to, that's never right when we're talking about 1 in 5, like that should be something that is a part of a conversation in a show, right? Like not a show that is like you were saying, putting the beans in the brownies.
Yeah.
Right. That's woven into a storyline because it's woven into all our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe there will be.
I'm rooting for you. Leave me with one last truth bomb about this, the link between representation in media, in particular TV, and inclusion.
I think it's that everyone has the right to see themselves, whether that's as a character on TV, or as a director or producer, writer, sound mixer, PA, grip. And I think it's just as important in having these conversations about who's in the stories and who's telling the stories as who's making this. And those numbers are sometimes way worse than the other, and want to do whatever we can and have these conversations to make sure that we're really changing the world behind the scenes, both above and below the line as well.
Love it. Oh my gosh, Lindsay, thank you so much. I'll put a link to Project Sleep in the comments. If folks want to get in touch with you, some of the work that you're doing, I think is phenomenal, not just Project Sleep, but your day job. I'll put that link out there as well, and just really, really appreciate you and everything that you're doing in this world and having this conversation.
This has been awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, y'all, get out there and do the next right thing. We will see you next time on Everyday Inclusion and Belonging. Cheers.